Let's take a trip down memory lane now then, Malcolm. And your upbringing, 7th of January, 1950. By God, you're 70 years old.
Yes.
How time flies.
It does, doesn't it? Yeah,
let's
really
talk
flies.
about those early memories and your upbringing, because you were born and you grew up in the, in Finlay Street, right by Craven Cottage, didn't you?
Yeah. I lived in Finlay Street, which led from the main road, Fulham Palace Road, all the way to Craven Cottage.
Yeah.
And I can remember clearly my first ever game that I went to see, and I was just 4 years of age, or coming up to 4, and this was around my birthday, when I was 4. And my father had his own painting and decorating company, and he used to work the 5 weekdays, and usually he would work all day Saturday as well. But on this particular occasion, he came home at lunchtime, and we used to put dustbins out to make sure that there was a parking space for him. You know, we put dustbins in on the curbside to ensure that nobody parked there. And anyway, he's parked up, and he said, "Right, son," he said, "I'm in perfect time." He said, "I'm going to take you to see your first match." And I was just so excited. And so my mother helped me put on my duffel coat, and off we went, me and my dad. And we walked up Finlay Street, joining the crowds, and we got to the turnstile at the Putney end, and through we went, and we went up to, it was a huge terrace, behind the Putney end goal. And we were about midway up, sort of right in the middle, as it were, and the crowds just kept coming in, more and more, and it started to get quite tight. And so my father lifted me up and put me on his shoulders. Yeah. And there was still quite a way to go before kickoff. And as more people came in and the crush got greater, the stewards came out, and they were stood on the track, and they started to motion with their arms, sort of waving, you know, let's get the kids down.
Yeah.
And so my father lifted me off of his shoulders and put me onto the upturned hands of the guy in front.
Yeah.
And everybody just shuffled their arms, and I literally skied on my backside all the way down to the front, where all the supporters had got their hands up and were helping all the kids to just ski on their bums all the way down to the front. The stewards were catching us all, and I was sat down right behind the goal. And my view of the pitch was through the net.
Yeah.
And I just sat there with my back against the advertising hoarding, and the teams came out, and Fulham were playing Blackburn. And Fulham were leading 2-1 at the end of 90 minutes. Yeah. But the referee played added time, and he actually played somewhere in the region of about 8 minutes. And it was in that last minute of added time that Blackburn broke away, and a fellow called Brian Douglas.
Good player, yeah.
Great player. And he could play either on the wing or at centre forward.
Yeah.
It didn't matter. And he absolutely flew. And he scored the goal, and the referee signalled a goal and then signalled the end of the game. And I felt really cheated.
Yeah.
About, what would it be now? It would have been about 12 years ago.
Right.
Newcastle United were playing Blackburn Rovers at Ewood Park.
Yeah.
And I was doing commentary for Century FM in the northeast on Newcastle matches.
Yeah.
And so over I went, and Blackburn had asked me if I would, before the game, if I'd just go and do a talk in a couple of their rooms. And I said, yeah, fine, happy to do it. So I went into one room, did my talk, and then I looked to my left, and there were 4 ex-Blackburn players.
Wow.
And one of them was Brian Douglas. And I went over, and I said, Malcolm McDonald, I said, I'm absolutely delighted to meet you. I said, and if you don't mind me saying so, I said, Fulham were cheated back in 1954. And he went, good heavens. He said, I remember the game. He said, the referee let the game go on 8 minutes over time. And he said, and I scored right there. I said, that's right. And I was sitting behind the goal you scored in, right behind it. You know, and we had this wonderful chat about a game that he had played in, scored the goal that got a point for Blackburn, and there was and I was talking to him from my perspective, looking through the net. It was a wonderful conversation, it really was, and a lovely guy, Brian Douglas, and what a player, what a player.
Fulham had some decent players in those days as well, and none more than the maestro.
Johnny Haynes.
Yeah.
Hainesy, my word. I watched him for 15 years or so.
Yeah.
As a kid. I then played with him when I signed for Fulham. Mm-hmm. Bobby Robson put me into the side, and I was just a very raw 18-year-old kid who had had a season at Tunbridge in the Southern League. And he put me up front, and Hainesy was the central midfielder and captain of the side. And I still, to this day, don't know whether he was right-footed or left-footed, because he was so superb with both. Oh, his passing, and he didn't look quick, but he was. There was quite a turn of speed to him, and he could just get away from an opponent, and then it was, without looking, it appeared that he would just ping a 40 or 50 or 60-yard ball, and it would just drop right at the foot of the intended recipient. And he was absolutely incredible to watch. Of course, it was his only club. He never went anywhere else. Mm-hmm. I always remember back in 1963, I was 13, and I had gone home for lunch for one reason or another. I don't remember why, because I used to have lunch at school, and so I was at home. I maybe had been ill. I don't recall, but I remember there was a bit of a commotion on the junction of Finlay Street and Woodlawn Road, which dissected Finlay Street in the middle. And out I went, and it was the day after the maximum wage had been abolished. Yeah?
Yep.
Cliff Lloyd and Jimmy Hill had been the architects of that. And Tommy Trinder, on the day that the maximum wage disappeared, he made Johnny Haynes the first ever £100 a week footballer. And the next day, Hainesy, where he had been driving an old Ford Prefect for some years, he had turned up at the ground with his brand new Jag. And this disturbance on the crossroads, Hainsey had a car accident on his first day on the road with his brand new Jag. And he was beside himself.
Oh, dude, he never got many things wrong. Arguably one of the greatest two passers of the ball, not just in England, but in Europe. But
yeah, I think he got about 63 caps.
Yeah, but he had a bad accident, didn't he? Round about 62, 63. And didn't that really finish his international career, Malcolm?
No, he was still the captain. He captained England in the 1962 World Cup.
Yeah, after that, in 63 or possibly
after
64.
I'm sure after that, maybe.
Yeah,
maybe.
Yeah, but your coming to Fulham was quite incredible, wasn't it? Because you used to collect the autographs of the players, and I love the story that I read in your book. A wonderful book, by the way, Supermac, my autobiography, co-written with Colin Mallam, when you got to carry Bobby's bags, and then many years he remembered when he signed you from Fulham. And then when Bobby won the FA Cup in '78, quite ironic, really, that he was the manager that prevented you, from winning the FA Cup.
Yeah, and they beat Arsenal.
Yeah,
1-0.
absolutely, yeah. So, tell us that story about carrying Bobby's bags. It's fantastic.
Well, it was in the middle of winter, and it was either for Christmas or for my birthday, which comes just a fortnight after. One or the other, I was given a brand new autograph book, and I thought, I've got to go and get the signatures of my beloved Fulham Football Club and all the players. And so, in those days, of course, I think there was just the one player, Johnny Haynes, who had a car. Everybody else used to arrive by public transport. And at the top of Finlay Street on Fulham Palace Road, there were about 4 bus stops. 2 on either side of the road, a number of different routes, and so the players would start to arrive, and I stood by the nearest bus stop to Finlay Street, and I was catching them and saying, "Could I have your autograph, please?" And they were all ever so good, and they would sign my book for me. And then Bobby Robson got off the bus, and I said, "Oh, Mr. Robson, could I have your autograph, please?" And so he said, "Of course you can, son." And he took my book off me and pen in one hand and handed me his bag, his holdall, his kit bag, with the other. And I got hold of it. And by heavens, it was heavy. And it sort of dropped to the ground, and I struggled to lift it up. And he was marching off. And he went along Fulham Palace Road, turned right into Finlay Street, and was heading down towards the club at the very end of the road. And there's me struggling with this bag, trying to keep up with him. And I'm puffing and blowing. And he is talking to me over his shoulder. And he said, "Well, son, do you play?" I do, Mr. Robson, yes. In fact, I play for my school, Sloane Grammar, by Chelsea Football Ground. He said, "Good for you." He said, "And what position do you play?" I said, "It just depends on where I'm needed to play." I said, it's usually somewhere in the middle, either at centre half or central midfield or at centre forward. I said, sometimes if I'm playing against the really big lads, I'll play outside left. Well, he said, "You seem to be quite a player." He said, "Are you right-footed or left-footed, son?" I said, "I'm left-footed." And then his eyes sort of lit, and he said, "There is always room for a left foot in every football team." And he started to give me the lesson why. And he was explaining a left foot on the left-hand side. He said it broadens the pitch to its. He said because a left foot will always take the ball and take it wide to the line, whereas somebody who's on the left and right-footed, they'll come inside and they're narrowing the pitch. And I'm getting this footballing lesson, and I'm absolutely fascinated. And Bobby Robson, he's giving me this dictatorial as I'm struggling behind him with a bag, and I'm listening so intently. And it was the first time that I had ever that I had ever seriously talked tactics or heard tactics being talked, if you like. And I listened all the way, because he moved from one thing on the football field to another, and so on and so forth. And he was giving me this free lesson. And we got to the stadium. He opened my autograph book. He quickly signed it, handed it to me, took the bag, and said, "See you, son." And he disappeared through the gate into the dressing room. And there was I with my autograph book, my pen, and a wonderful lesson in the tactics of football. Oh, wow. And so off I went home. 10 years later, we had moved away from Fulham, and we were down in Sussex, and I had started playing for Tunbridge Football Club, who were then playing in the Southern League. It was like if it would have been a couple of tiers down from Division 4. And I was playing for Tunbridge. Harry Haslam was the manager. And at the end of my first full season, playing it right back, I was aware that there were league clubs interested, in particular Crystal Palace. And at the end of the season, I went with Crystal Palace, played for them an under-19 competition over in Holland. And I remember playing in the Feyenoord Stadium, which was it was a great memory to take home with me. And we won. We beat Ajax 1-0, and we won the competition, and we were dead chuffed with that. And Bert Head was the Crystal Palace manager who had been out there with us, and he proudly carried the cup that we had won through the airport. And we got to customs, and he was questioned by the customs men. They said, "We'd like you to come over here, sir, thank you." And they took him behind a barrier and quizzed him about this silver cup being brought into the country. And of course, he had to explain, "Look, I'm the manager of Crystal Palace. We've just gone out playing the under-19 tournament." Anyway, but from my point of view, I had been doing some training with Palace, and I just found the club chock-a-block with players. And I thought, well, they want to sign me, but there's all these terrific kids. There was Stevie Kember and so many others who were all they all later made it into the league. And I just thought, well, these lads can't get in the team. Well, I'm not going to get in the first team. And my ambition was such that it was telling me, it's a great opportunity. Don't sign for them. You want to sort of have a clear passage to get from the reserves into the first team and what have you. So anyway, the next thing, I got a phone call from Fulham Football Club, and they said, "Would you like to come up and talk with Bobby Robson, who had just become the manager at Fulham?" And so forth. I got in my car and I was up there like a shot. And so I arrived at Fulham Football Club, went up the staircase outside at the side of Craven Cottage, went in through the door, and there was the reception on the right-hand side. And I said to the young lady there, I said, "My name's Malcolm MacDonald." I said, "And Bobby Robson's asked me to speak with him." "Oh, yes," she said, "he's expecting you." She said, "Go to the end of the corridor and knock on the last door on the left." I said, "Okay, thank you." And I went along and I knocked on the door, and there was a gruff, "Come in." And so I opened the door, went in, and there was Bobby Robson sat at a desk, and he had a letter in his hand, and he just kept his head down, never looked at me. So I come in, shut the door, and just sort of stood there, and he just kept his head down and made out he was reading this letter. And I later learned from when I was doing the radio program, the Legends for Century FM, did it with Bernie Slavin, ex-Middlesbrough, and with Eric Gates, ex-Ipswich. Yeah, and of course he has been there for a very long time with Bobby Robson as the manager. And I learned from Gatesy that this was a ploy of Bobby Robson to make a player feel uncomfortable before negotiations started. And so I stood there, and I stood there, and I stood there, and I thought, does he know I'm here? He's got to know I'm here. He told me to come in, for heaven's sake. And I'm just stood and stood and stood, and he's got his head down, looking at this sheet of paper. And then after this interminable period, he's finally put the sheet of paper down, and he's looked at me, and then he sort of narrowed his eyes and looked again, and then he's pointed at me. He said, I know you. He said, I know you. He said, you're that little squirt who was at the bus stop with your autograph book, and you grabbed my bag off me. He said, and you followed me all the way down Finley Street to the ground, he said. And you know, he said, you wouldn't shut up. And of course, it was him that hadn't shut up. And it was the barriers sort of fell down.
Yep.
You know, the ice melted, and I said, well, I said, I'm delighted to be here. As you know, I'm a Mad King Fulham supporter and what have you. And so he said, right, there's your contract, son. I said, I'll be honest with you, Mr. Robson, I'm earning more at Tunbridge Football Club than what you're offering me here. I said, by the time all my bonuses and crowd bonuses and so on and so forth get tallied up, I said, I'm better off at Tunbridge. He said, well, he said, if you do the business here, he said, then you'll get a lot more. So on that promise, I signed for Fulham, heart overruling my head, as it were.
Yeah.
And Fulham had just been relegated the season before from the first division to the second division. And so the first team from the season before, that was pretty much the first team that Bobby Robson started to select. But it became obvious that things were going awry. And it was a lot of senior players, you know, that a lot of very senior players. And I always think it's difficult for a man who has been a teammate of all those players to suddenly become the man. Very difficult indeed. And I was seeing those difficulties at work. And Bobby Robson was quite a studious coach, and could talk tactics at length. But he was sort of not being listened to, let me put it that way.
Yeah.
He would be interrupted. He would have other thoughts and ideas thrown at him where he was wanting to get something implemented and it just wasn't happening because of this. And there's me playing in the reserve side, but I'm playing at fullback. Yeah. Where I played for Tunbridge. And I suppose I ought to explain that one. The reason why I was fullback was that at age 15, when I was at school, I had been playing in those three central roles, you know, one or the other of them, as I'd mentioned earlier. But the sportsmaster then said, I'm putting you forward for the London Grammar School team. What position shall I put you down as? And I thought, I'm going to be up against some seriously big 18 and 19-year-olds. And I was a slow physical developer. And so I thought, right, which position can I get away with a lack of inches and a lack of weight? And I thought, right, left back. So I said, put me down as a left back. And I got into the London Grammar School side. I was aged just 15, and we did well, and I thoroughly enjoyed it. It was a great experience, and so excuse me, and so from there I was now playing with the big lads. So it went from London Grammar Schools. I went down to Sussex. Couldn't find a good enough level of football for me to play at. And a driving instructor who happened to be an ex-pro from Coventry, he said to me, he said, look, if you're looking for a good standard to play in, he said, I've got a mate who runs a side over in Sevenoaks, and it was called Sevenoaks Juniors. And we played in senior football despite the fact that Juniors was a part of the name. And it was all young lads. And so I went in, and again, I was playing at fullback, still sort of a bit of a slow physical developer. And then I played 3 games for them and was spotted by a scout scout for Tunbridge, and Harry Haslam came and looked and said, I'm going to sign your son at Tunbridge. All right, fine. And I was put on some really handsome money as a part-timer. And he said to me, right, I've seen you playing left back, son. I know you're left-footed. He said, but I'm going to teach you to kick with your right foot, so I'm playing you at right back.
That was because of Vic, wasn't it?
Right, yeah, there was a very adequate, in fact, a very good player at left back called Vic Akers.
Yeah.
Now, Vic, when ladies football started in this country, within the professional clubs, Vic Akers was appointed by Arsenal as the ladies coach. And for 10 years, they won everything. Absolutely everything.
They were brilliant.
Yes. And so Arsene Wenger was so impressed with Vic Akers, who had been running the ladies' side as manager and chief coach. Arsene said to him, I want you to come and join me in the men's game. And so he was with the first team of Arsenal. And maybe if anybody remembers that Arsene Wenger, he would decide on a substitution and then you have to write a slip out and give it to the fourth official. And Vic used to go across to the fourth official and give him the slip and organise the substitute getting on. And he was a good player. So I was playing at right back, in brackets, learning to kick with my right foot, end of brackets. And so it seemed that I was destined to become a fullback simply because of lack of inches and lack of weight that I had experienced over those years. And Tunbridge was a great experience. By heavens, it was a great experience. These were really hard, tough guys, and they used to stick the boot in and all sorts. It was a rough and tough game of football.
It was brutal, wasn't it, in the Southern League?
Oh, it was. Yes. Oh, it really was. And by heavens, I had to learn very quickly how to hold my own in it. And I did. I was just learning so rapidly. And the more senior guys, Jeff Truitt and Bobby Taylor and John Ripley and Dave Smith and what have you, they were absolutely terrific. They really were. And they helped me as much as they could. Joe Carolan, I forgot to mention. Dear me, he won countless caps with the Republic of Ireland as a Man United player. And he had been a fullback with Man United, but was playing centre forward for us at Tunbridge. And so he was a great help because he had played at the very top level as a fullback. Anyway, so there was me sort of stuck in that fullback position. And that's what Bobby Robson signed. He assumed I was a fullback. Yeah. And so he appointed Harry Haslam. It took him away from Tunbridge and appointed him as his assistant at Fulham Football Club. And there were a whole host of injuries, and it was all to forwards. So they were missing forwards in the first team through injury. The forwards from the reserves stepped in and they got injured. And in the end, they had Frank Large, who was a right half that they had signed from Leicester some while earlier. And they had asked him to play up front pretty much on his own. And they felt, Bobby Robson felt that he needed somebody else up front with him. And I'd been drafted into the forward line in the reserves because they were so short. And I'd started sticking goals in. Now, at Tunbridge with Harry Haslam, I used to play at right back in the Southern League matches on a Saturday. But we used to play in various cup competitions, the Kent Floodlit Cup and so on and so forth. And he used to play me up front quite often. And I was scoring a lot of goals in those cup competitions. And so Bobby Robson was at his wit's end. And Harry Haslam said, Bobby, he said, you're short of a forward. Stick Malcolm McDonald up there. He said, I had him playing up front in the evening cup match at Tunbridge. He scored a bucket load. So Bobby Robson stuck me up front. And my first game was against Oxford United. In that game, I scored 2 goals, both of which were disallowed for somebody else being offside, which is disappointing. And we got beat.
Did Big Ron play in that game for Oxford? Do you
He
remember?
probably did, yes.
Yeah.
He was there at the time.
Yeah, the tank.
Yeah. Yeah, he used to sort of play right half, didn't he?
Well, so Ron said, yeah.
Yeah, so Ron said, yeah.
Played everywhere,
Ron. Right half. And then came the next game. Now, we were at home to Crystal Palace, and it was being played on a Friday night because there would have been a clash. Chelsea were at home the next day, and just a mile up the road from Fulham. They always kept the 2 clubs playing quite separately. And so it was Crystal Palace on the Friday. Now, Fulham were at risk in that Crystal Palace match of going a record 1,000 minutes without scoring a goal. Yeah, the drought had been going that long. And so it would have been a great embarrassment to all concerned, huge embarrassment. And so in midway in the first half, I've had a ball played just beyond the centre half, so I've used my speed, got to it first and just kept running. And then I took it round John Jackson, the goalkeeper, and slid it in. And that was 1-0. And the relief for so many that finally Fulham had scored, it was immense. But I was by then realising that there was a lot of conflict going on. It was a very unhappy squad to be in. And having scored this also important goal, I think it was about 2 players came up and said, "Well done." The others just
there's a lot there, isn't it? Yeah.
And I thought, oh dear,
right,
that really is a problem that's going to be very difficult to overcome. So anyway, we then played another 4 games, me playing up front with Frank Large, and I scored in each of the games. So I had scored 5 goals in 6 games. And Tommy Trinder decided, he was the chairman of Fulham, the great comedian, he decided that he was going to sack Bobby Robson, which he did, and he appointed as a caretaker manager Johnny Haynes. So Johnny Haynes immediately dropped all those that weren't in his clique, and so I was one of those. So I was the club's leading goal scorer at the time. I had 5 goals in 6 games, and I was left out.
And you were left out for some time, and still.
I was left out, until almost the end of the season, and I started to be used a bit as a sub, and came on as a sub once or twice. But in the main, was the leading goal scorer throughout the season until. Right at the death, they signed a fellow called Brian Stagg Brian Deere. He was nicknamed
from
Stagg. Brian Deere from West Ham. And he, in the last few games of the season, scored 6 goals. So he finished top scorer and I was second top. And I realised that, and I played in the combination then for most of the season, and I finished the combination's top goal scorer. I think it was about 35 goals. And so at the end of the season, I just realised I was struggling on the money I was on. I'd done well. I wasn't going to get a new contract or a rise or anything. And I just couldn't see my way ahead at all. And so it got to pre-season training, and nobody at the club had said anything to me other than when to report for pre-season training. So I was doing the training as was demanded, and still nobody had said anything to me at all. And so I went into the office and I said, I would like to have an appointment to see the chairman. Tommy Trinder. He said, well, he doesn't really see players. I said, well, in this particular instance, I think he should. And so I got an appointment with Tommy Trinder. And of course, his footballing hero was Johnny Haynes. And so I thought, I've really got to take the bull by the horns in this situation. Seriously take it by the horns and not kowtow in any way. So I went in, and Tommy just said, he cracked a couple of funny, what have you, as he always. And he said, right, what can I do to help you? I said, I feel I'm just being totally ignored. I said, I was the leading goal scorer for a very long time last season and wasn't being picked. I finished up the leading goal scorer in the football combination and still I'm ignored. And so I'm not going anywhere here, not going anywhere at all other than down. And he said, well, what do you want us to do? I said, I was told by Bobby Robson. He said, well, he's not here. I said, I know, but I was told by him, do well, and I'd get a rise. I said, I have done well, and nothing. I'm just being ignored. So I said, and I'm getting so frustrated. I said, if I don't get away from Fulham, I said, I'm going to get hold of Johnny Haynes in training. I said, and I am going to absolutely beat him to a pulp. Tommy Trinder said, where would you like to go, son?
Luton.
Seriously. And 2 days later, I was told to go to Craven Cottage, that there was some news for me. So I went to Craven Cottage, and in walked Alex Stock from Luton.
Yeah.
He said, I've just agreed £17,500 for you, old son. Now, get that contract signed. And he more than doubled my money.
Yeah.
And so Luton were in the opposite throes to Fulham. Fulham were going down. They'd been relegated 2 seasons in a row. First to the second, second to the third. Luton had just been promoted from the 4th to the 3rd. And so things were going well there. And so Alex Stock put this contract down in front of me and I signed it. I said, great, thank you. He said, good, I'll see you there tomorrow. And we'll be there in time for training. And he told me where to be, what time, and all the paperwork was done. And I trained with Luton and did the necessary additional signing that you have to do on the various levels of football reform. So I'm registered with Luton for everything. And this we were straight into pre-season friendlies. Yeah. And I wasn't sure whether or not I'd been signed as a fullback or as a centre forward. Now, Alex Stock, he played me as a fullback in the first friendly, then he played me as a centre forward in the next, then he played me as a fullback, and then he played me as a centre forward. And I thought, oh dear me, why the constant change? So anyway, it came to the first game of the season, and I'm thinking, oh, well, will I be in the side, won't I? And so Alex Stock, he came down after the training on a Friday, and he pinned up the team sheet, and then we've all crowded around having a look, and I'm sort of at the back looking over at heads, and I wasn't down as a fullback, and so I was sort of waiting for heads in front of me to clear away so that I could start to see the lower half of the team sheet. And I went down, and I wasn't 4, I wasn't 5 or 6, I wasn't 7, I wasn't 8, or I wasn't 9. Whoops, McDonald, 10. And so I was in, playing up front with Laurie Sheffield. And from there, I learnt one of the greatest lessons in my life with the way that Alex Stock went about his business of preparing us for the game the following day. It wasn't just a question of preparing us for the game, it was a question of preparing us for the whole season. And it made such an impact on me. And what happened was, Jimmy Andrews, the coach, he said, you see the numerical order? He said, just the 11 players who are on that team sheet, he said, who are starting the game tomorrow in the dressing room. He said, and I want you all in numerical order. There was bench seating going round 3 walls. And so in one corner was the goalkeeper, and then various players all the way round to the far corner where the outside left was, Graham French. And then Alex Stock came into the dressing room, and he said, well, here we are at the start of a new season. And he said, the good people of Luton are going to be coming in their droves to watch you play. Now, the very least you can do for them is get promotion. What do you say? Now, I must tell you at this point that all managers never, ever, mention promotion. They never talk about winning cups. It's almost that you create a taboo. Alex Stock was the opposite. He met it head on. He set the targets of what we were expected to do. And so he said, right, now I'm going to tell you how to get promoted. It's some statement, isn't it?
It certainly is. And it worked.
Well, it did, ultimately, yes. And he said, and his formula, it really is so simple. If you really think about the game, his formula was very, very simple. And he said, we've got 46 games to play in this season of third division. He said, we cannot afford to lose any more than 9 of those 46. The wins and the draws will just look after themselves after that, but you must not lose any more than 9. Now, to achieve that, he said at one end, in those 46 games, you cannot concede any more than 36 goals. And in those 46 games at the other end, you have to score a minimum of 82 goals. He said, I'm not going to tell you defenders how to achieve that. He said, because you'll be working day in, day out with Coach Jimmy Andrews and making sure that you are all fully understanding what's going on. He said, but I can tell you at the other end of it all where those 82 goals are coming from. And he then went to the goalkeeper, Tony Reid, and he said, Tony Reid, don't expect you to score any goals, but I do expect you to save at least 3 penalties. John Ryan, right back, and he had been at Fulham with me. We were together there. John Ryan, right back. You love an overlap, old son. You love to get forward, and I've got you down for 5. And then he turned to Jack Bannister. He said, Jack Bannister, 3. Our left back. He said, you poo your pants every time you cross the halfway line, but nevertheless, I've got you down for 3. Mike Keane at 4. Skipper of the club, and you love a free kick, and I've got you down for 10. And he continued, giving everybody, every outfield player, a target of goals that they had to go for. And he gave the 5, the 6, and then the 7, and then the 8 a target of goals. And then he got to the 9. And he said, Laurie Sheffield, by heavens, old son, you've been about a bit. You've had more clubs than Jack Nicklaus. But nevertheless, you can still run a bit, you can still jump a bit, and I've got you down for 18. Very rapidly, sitting next to Laurie Sheffield, I'm listening carefully. He's given 18, the old head. I'm young legs, so they'll probably expect a bit more from me. So 20. Can I get 20 goals? And I'm thinking, yeah, I'm pretty sure I can get 20 at this level. I can get 20 goals, yes. So I'm convincing myself about this in my head. And Alex Stock averts his gaze from Laurie Sheffield to me sitting next to him and says, McDonald, the new boy, 30, and went straight on to Graham French. I just looked open-mouthed, and I nudged Laurie Sheffield next to me, and I said, Laurie, did I hear him right? Did he give me a target of 30 goals? He said, you did hear him right, boyo, and bloody good luck to you. And that was it. I had to score 30.
And sorry, Malcolm.
Go on.
Your first game was against Bournemouth.
No, Barrow.
Oh, sorry, Barrow. You take up the story, sir.
Okay. The first game was against Barrow at home. And so, come the end of the game, we've beaten Barrow 3-0. I have made 2, but not scored. And so, coming into the dressing, and I'm just in this sort of fit of depression, and I'm, blimey, right, let's work this one out. So, I haven't scored, so that's 45 games to go. I've got to score 30 goals. That means I've got to score 1 goal every 1.5 games. I thought, who does that? Jimmy Greaves. He's the only fellow who's ever done it. And I thought, blimey. And the players realise, I think, that here was a young man under severe pressure by the weight of it all that had been put on his shoulders. And they were great with me, absolutely fabulous. They were terrific in training with me, and they worked hard with me, and they helped me with finishing. And we went down to Bournemouth, and it was 0-0 at half-time. Midway through the second half, Mike Keane, the skipper, he slid this wonderful pass just between the two centre halves, and I was well onside and I was away. And I ran the ball, went round the goalkeeper and slid it in. The relief that I felt was absolutely huge. And I realised that I was off of that dreaded figure of 30, and I only had 29 to get next. And having got rid of that 3 at the beginning, it all seemed to change. And I went out from there on in relaxed and very confident mood. And the goals were going in. And we got to the end of the season. It was the last match, and we were away at Mansfield. And it so worked out because we were second to Leighton Orient. And if we drew, no matter what other score lines took place, we were getting promoted. So we said to ourselves, right, come on, all of us, we don't concede. If we don't concede, we go up. And that was the all-important task. And so goal scoring was pretty much forgotten about in that match. And we just defended and we made sure that Mansfield didn't score. We were quite happy to boot it out the park and just get it away from our penalty area as far as possible. It wasn't very pretty, but by heavens, it was very effective. And we were promoted. We got a 0-0 draw, and we went into the dressing room, and the directors in their generosity, great generosity, sent 2 bottles of champagne down to the dressing room for us all to share. So I went and got 2 plastic cups. I put a little champagne into each, went over to Alex Stock, and I handed him one of the plastic cups. And I lifted mine, and I said, well, here's to you, boss. You told us that we could be promoted, and you told us how we could be promoted. I said, but I've got an apology to make. He said, what's that, old son? I said, well, you gave me a target of 30 goals, and I'm sorry, but I failed to get that target. I said, I only got 29. He said, well, you see, old son, there are those who are able to hit a target smack on. There are those who can go over and above and get more than what set them. And then there are people like you. And he handed me back the champagne. And I thought, bastard. And so we got to the start of the next season. There were a lot of new faces in the team. And Alex Stock had us all sat round, and he delivered pretty much the same speech.
Yep.
But this time, instead of 46 games in the second division, we had 42.
Yep.
But it didn't seem to matter to him. He was still doling out high targets and a quest for promotion. And he got to me, and now I was the 9, not the 10. And he said, McDonald, the not so new boy, 30. Oh, and don't forget, you owe me one from last season. And that was his challenge to me. And so out we went, and we were going pretty well. And then Easter came, and we went down to Bristol City, and we were doing well. And then all of a sudden, there was just some silly incident where somebody missed a kick, and it hit a Bristol City player, and it trickled over the line, and we lost on a really stupid goal. So that was on the Friday. On the Saturday, we lost, I think it was to Gillingham, and that was a home record. Gone for a Burton.
Because you had a brilliant home record in them days, didn't you?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. I think we'd gone 38 games without defeat. And so on the Sunday, we were in training, having played 2 games in 2 days, and we had a game then on the Monday, on the Easter Monday. And so we did light training on the Sunday morning, and there were hot bars being organised for everybody to have a good old soak. And at the end of the training, people started to disappear up the tunnel, and Alex Stock came down the tunnel, and he motioned to me to follow him, and he walked me out to the centre circle of the pitch. Empty stadium, not a soul in it. All the players have now disappeared and gone into the dressing room. And he's looking over his shoulder to make sure we're not being overheard. And he said, well, old son, promotion's out the window. And so a small club like Luton, we have to find a way of bringing in the old pound notes. And if we don't get promotion, then we have to sell our top assets. And right now, old son, that's you. So you're on your bike at the end of the season, and you'll be going to the big league. He said, I'll keep you informed of everything that's going on, but what I can tell you for the moment, there are 3 clubs interested in you. There's Manchester United, Chelsea, and Newcastle United. You just keep sticking them in the old onion bag, old son, and keep them interested. I said, will do. And so we got to the very last game of the season, and Cardiff were 5th and we were 6th. And we had to beat Cardiff by 2 clear goals for the club to go into the Watney Cup instead of Cardiff. And so, and for a club in like Luton, it's big time stuff, the Watney Cup.
That was a good competition because it was all the top goal scorers of all the leagues, wasn't it, Malcolm?
That's right,
yeah.
Yes. But we had to beat Cardiff by 2 clear goals. And so I scored 1, I scored 2. And then late in the second half, I got a 3rd. So I've scored a hat-trick, we've beaten them 3-0, and Luton are going into the Watney Cup. And so we're in the dressing room. This time, no champagne. So I've got 2 plastic cups of tea, and I've gone over to Alex Stock and I've given him the plastic cup. And I've said, well, boss, I said, you set me a target of 30 goals and 1 that I missed on from last season. I said, well, the first tonight, I equaled your 30 goals. I said, the second one I got is the one that I owed you from last season. The third one, I said, well, you can have the third one for luck. He says, you're going to need some bloody luck where you're going, mate. Come and see me Friday and I'll have a bit of news for you. And so I went to see him on the Friday and he hadn't arrived. And so I hung around, and sooner or later he did come. And he came in all of a lather. And he said, I've just been down at the Great Northern Hotel by King's Cross Station. He said, and I've done the deal with Newcastle United. So, old son, he said, get yourself there to the hotel. He said, they're all down for the FA Cup tomorrow. He said, you need to speak with Joe Harvey, the manager. He said, and sting them for every... So I said, right, you are. And so off I went, and I drove down the M1 and got myself to King's Cross Station, parked up, went to reception, and I said, could you tell me where the Newcastle United party is? And they said, oh yeah, at the end of that corridor over there. And so I started walking down the corridor, and then the door at the end opened. A big pair of shoulders sort of came out through the doorway and stopped and looked. And I said, Mr. Harvey, I said, my name's Malcolm McDonald, and I've been told to come here by Alex Stock, the Luton manager. And Joe Harvey looked at me and he said, what the bloody hell do you think you were doing, scoring a hat-trick on Tuesday night in your last bloody game? I looked at him and the jaw just dropped. And anyway, so we got into a private room and we sat down and we hammered the terms out and what have you. And I said, so what was that about? You not want to score a hat-trick? He said, of course I want you to score hat-tricks, but for us, he said, back at Easter, I agreed with Luton Town Football Club £155,000. He said, this morning, Alex Stock, your manager, has come here and after the result that you had on Tuesday against Cardiff, has put the fee up 10 grand a goal that you scored.
He's a crafty old cow, wasn't he, Stock?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. But, of course, come my home debut for Newcastle.
Before your home debut, Malcolm, though, they sent you up in a roller with one of the sponsors who looked as though, to all intent and purpose, he was your chauffeur. And there was a lovely little story about one of the hacks that come out with a wisecrack.
Yeah. Having signed on the Friday, you sign the contract and various other papers and what have you, but nothing is done and dusted until the player has a medical and passes it.
Yep.
And in those days, it had to take place in the medical room of the buying club.
Yeah.
And so I went up to Newcastle on the Monday. Now, having gone back on the Friday to Luton Town Football Club and said, right, it's all signed and sealed and done, but I've got to go up there for the medical on Monday. Alex Stock said, yes, old son, well, I've got that all arranged for you. He said, our sponsor, George Twigg, he's got a car business, as you know. He said, well, he's lending us his Rolls Royce for you to go up in. He said, and he's supplying a young director of his as your chauffeur.
Yeah.
And so I'm sat in this Rolls Royce early on Monday morning, and up we go, up the M1 and the A1 to Newcastle. And we're not far from the ground. And the young lad, he pulled the car up by the curb, and he said, right, he said, out you get. I said, I beg your pardon. He said, out, sit in the back. And he's then, from under his seat, he's got a chauffeur's cap out. Yeah. And he's put that on, and I'm sat in the back of this Rolls Royce. And he's gone up the road, pulled in through the gates of St James Park, and there's a big car park in front of the stadium. And he's sort of done this huge sweep around, and there is a big gaggle of press all stood on the steps that lead up to the main entrance. And he's stopped in front of these press guys, and you can see that some of them have got microphones, others have got cameras, others have got notebooks and pencils, and they're all sort of there and ready. And he's got out the car, and he has walked the long way round, and finally got to the rear door, and he's opened that, and I've stepped out of the Rolls Royce. And as I did, a voice in the middle of this pack of pressmen has, in a sort of stage whisper, said, "This is the first time I've ever seen a player actually arrive in his signing on fee." Well, everybody just laughed, me included. And it turned out that the remark was made by the then Sun reporter in the Northeast, Bob Cass. And Bob and I started a Sun column, and so we worked together for the 5 years that I was there. And he was an absolutely brilliant guy, one of the funniest men I've ever met in my life. No longer with us, sadly. And so everything sort of relaxed on that.
Yes.
And up the stairs I went into the medical room, and up to then I'd never missed a game through injury.
Yeah.
So I flew through the medical, and everything was signed, sealed, and delivered, and I was a Newcastle player.
And introduced to the Geordie faithful. Against Liverpool, you made your home debut, didn't you? And you had a dream that day. Boy, wasn't it a dream. Hat-trick.
Well, yeah.
And a kicking.
Yeah, it was quite a remarkable day.
It was, wasn't it?
Excuse me. So, you have to remember that having played at sort of third division level and just a few games at second division level, all of a sudden, here I was in front of a packed stadium, and as the team ran out onto the pitch, the noise was absolutely deafening. Yeah. The atmosphere was just electric. and this is why it's so difficult at the moment for players.
Absolutely, yeah.
Because you have that noise and atmosphere in a stadium, and it just lifts you.
Yeah.
It really does lift you. And so the game has started, and Emily Hughes scored for Liverpool.
Yeah.
Made it 1-0, and we're carrying on playing, and signed just after myself was Terry Hibbett from Leeds United, and Terry and I, we were starting to build a good little relationship together, and he slid a wonderful little ball through to a lad called David Young, who later went to Sunderland, and his claim to fame was that he was the sub on the bench at Wembley when Sunderland won the FA Cup in '73.
Yes.
And David Young was tripped in the penalty area by Kevin Keegan.
Yeah.
And so I took the penalty and scored, and that made it 1 each. And then a bit later, in the first half still, Terry Hibbett slid another wonderful pass. This time it was to me, and I was just able to dink it over the outstretched foot of Larry Lloyd, and I went round Lloydie and then cracked it into the far top corner. And it was quite spectacular.
Yes, it was.
And so the crowd have gone daft. We're 2-1 up against Liverpool. I just scored my second goal, and I've gone to the corner flag to the left in celebration, and all the players have come running the length of the field and all congratulated me. And we're starting to head back towards the halfway line to get the match restarted. And I've listened, and the crowd are all singing in unison. Now, the hit musical at the time was Jesus Christ Superstar down in London. And the supporters were singing that title song, but they changed all the words. And so they were singing, Supermac, Superstar, how many goals have you scored so far? And I thought, blimey, who's handed the song sheets out? You know, it was quite remarkable. It really was, and and it was the sort of forging of a wonderful relationship that I've had with the Geordie folk ever since.
And then you went on and scored your hat trick.
I got it. Yes, I got the third.
Yeah.
And again, it was a super goal. It was a ball played into John Tudor, and he first time just lifted it over a defender's foot into my path, and I cracked it first time into the low corner, and well, goalkeepers don't like having hat-tricks scored against them, but Ray Clements in particular, I learned, really, really hated it. And a bit later in the game, he stuffed a goal kick, and he was one of the sweetest kickers of a ball that you could ever wish to see. And so for him to duff it, it's made me think in years that have followed that he's done that purposely, because he wasn't one to duff a kick at all. And it's come bobbling at me, and I've gone to control it, and it's come up, it's hit my leg, it's gone up and over Larry Lloyd, and I've sprinted past him, and as it's coming down and down, I've looked, and Ray Clements has come tearing out of his goal, and I've leapt up and volleyed the ball over his head, and I've landed, and I'm looking past Ray Clements, and the ball has come down, and then it's just sat on the roof of the net, the wrong side of the bar. And then Ray Clements, he just put 6 studs into my face at pace. And that was me done for the rest of the match. I was carried off, and I tried to stay conscious on the pitch. But by the time they put me on the treatment bed in the physio's room, I just sort of went spark out. I was out for the count totally. And I woke up to see Frank Clark, our left back and vice captain. Frank Clark at the foot of the bed. And I would often, as a player, go, while everybody was getting all hyped up, I used to go the other way as a player. And I could go and have a kick for 10 minutes in the middle of getting ready. And I used to just stay very calm, very relaxed. And so I sort of came to thinking that the game was yet to be played. And I just said to Frank, I've just had this really incredible dream. I said, I've just dreamt that I scored a hat-trick. He said, you have scored a hat-trick, you idiot. This is after the game, not before. I know, for heaven's sake. And so I had to really work my memory to get back all of the events that had taken place. So yeah, that was quite a home debut.